This happened 2 weeks ago. I had just moved into a small apartment building. I wanted peace after my breakup. The city was loud, and I craved quiet. The building was old and a bit run down, but I liked the way it looked. It felt cozy, like a good place to settle down. In the first few days, everything was fine. I set up my work area and unpacked my things. I liked being alone. But on the third night, I heard something strange. It was low, like whispers coming through the walls from the empty apartment next door. I thought it was just noise left behind from the last tenant. I felt uneasy but tried to shake it off. As the days went by, the whispers grew louder. I sat in my living room, trying to work. Each night, I heard those murmurings mixed with rhythmic thumps, almost like someone was walking back and forth. It was hard to focus. Something felt off, but I couldn't figure out what. Then, the lights began flickering. At first, it was just a dimming. But when the noises peaked, the shadows in my apartment deepened. A chill spread through me each time it happened. I remember the first time I actually saw something. It was late, and I glanced out the window next door. There, in the dark, was a tall figure. It looked like it was watching me from behind the curtains. My heart raced. I barely breathed. I don't know if it was real or just my imagination. The figure vanished too quickly, leaving me feeling dizzy and scared. I wanted to dismiss it, but deep down, dread settled in. I began losing sleep. The whispers never stopped. They became a constant echo in my mind. Sometimes it felt like they were calling me, but I couldn't understand the words. I thought maybe it was just the stress from moving. Yet, an unsettling feeling of being watched hung over me. I wondered if someone truly lived in that empty apartment or if I was just losing my mind. I thought about asking the landlord, but fear held me back. I was afraid of what I might learn. I even reached for my phone one night to call a friend. But my hand shook, and I hesitated. What if it was all in my head? Then, one night, the power went out. Darkness fell like a blanket. The whispers became loud, almost like screams. I stood frozen in my living room, paralyzed by fear. Then I heard a knock. Just one. It came from my door. For a moment, I couldn't move. My heart thundered in my chest. Should I open the door? What if the figure was out there? I felt a mix of fear and dread. I didn't want to answer, but I also couldn't ignore it. I was caught between wanting to know and staying hidden in safety. I took a deep breath, my hand frozen inches from the doorknob. The knock echoed in my mind, a cacophony over the chaotic whispers that had become all too familiar. I could hear my pulse racing, each thud a reminder of the fear choking me. Who is it? I finally managed to call out, my voice barely above a whisper. The silence that followed felt thick and suffocating. No response came, only the pervasive noise in my head, a mix of whispers, urging me, calling me. Another knock. This one was louder, more insistent. I flinched, heart racing. I wanted to look through the peephole, but that would mean moving. I couldn't bring myself to do it. Then it happened. The lights flickered back on for a brief moment, illuminating my small apartment. I caught a glimpse of the figure beyond the door. It stood there, distorted by the frosted glass, shadowy and tall. I barely recognized it in the brief illumination. Panic swelled in my chest. I staggered back, feeling the cool wall behind me. Another knock, this time accompanied by a soft voice, "Help me." The words were faint, layered amid the whispers, but they felt unmistakable. I didn't understand. It was all too much, and I had to make a choice. I turned away from the door. The whispers grew louder, crashing around me like a storm. My eyes darted around the room. I thought about fleeing the apartment, but where would I go? I had no one nearby, no place to run to. Desperation clawed at me. "Who are you?" I shouted at the door, my voice shaking. "What do you want?" Silence answered me, heavy and thick. I waited, fear coiling inside. Then, something dropped outside my door. I flinched, heart pounding. I crept forward and peered through the peephole. My breath caught. I could barely see, but there was something on the floor, a piece of paper. I hesitated, drawn to it yet terrified. The whispers seemed to calm, almost curiously urging me. I turned the knob slowly, bracing myself for whatever lay beyond. As I opened the door, the hallway was dim. The faint shape was still there, lying flat against the worn floor. Cautiously, I knelt down and picked it up. It was a key, old and rusted, attached to a tarnished tag that read, Apartment 2B. My heart raced. 2B was the apartment next door, the one that had been empty since I arrived. I felt a chill ripple through me. What did this mean? The whispers intensified, swirling in my mind. The feeling of being watched returned, crawling over my skin. I straightened, the key heavy in my palm. I felt compelled to find out more. Just as I turned to step back inside, a shadow flickered at the corner of my vision. I whipped around, and my breath caught again. The figure was back, now standing in the hallway, only a few feet away. That's when I realized it wasn't he just watching me. It was beckoning. My legs felt like lead as I stared at the figure in front of me. The whispers swirled louder, drowning out my rational thoughts. It was hard to tell if the figure was even human. All I could see was a silhouette, shifting in the dim light. It raised an arm, pointing toward the door of apartment 2B. I took a shaky breath and stepped forward. Maybe this was the moment I would find some answers. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat a mixture of fear and curiosity. I turned to look back at my own apartment's door, hesitant to leave it behind. But the need to know tugged at me. With the key in hand, I approached the door of 2B. The whispers quieted, which surprised me. It felt almost as if they were anticipating something, waiting for me to take the plunge. The old door looked even more worn than I remembered, paint peeling from its edges. I glanced back at the shadow. It had moved closer but remained just out of reach. I inserted the key into the lock. It was stiff, resisting my attempts. "Come on," I muttered under my breath, twisting the key harder. Finally, I heard a loud click, the sound resonating in the eerie silence. I pushed the door open, wincing as it creaked ominously. The apartment was dark, shrouded in shadows. Dust hung in the air like a fog, illuminated only by slivers of light creeping in from the hallway. I stepped inside, hesitating as goosebumps prickled my skin. I flicked the light switch, but nothing happened. The room remained as dark as before. "Hello?" I called out. My voice echoed back as I took a few cautious steps in. The air was heavy, stagnant, as if time had stopped here. Suddenly, I heard something, a soft scuffling noise coming from the far corner. I froze, heart pounding in response. "Is anyone there?" I tried again, but dread filled my chest. I turned to leave, suddenly desperate to get out, when a sudden gust swept through the apartment, slamming the door shut behind me. Panic surged. I rushed to the door, but it wouldn't budge. I yanked on the knob, rattling it furiously. "Let me out!" I shouted. The scuffling grew louder, and I realized it was coming closer. With a final shove, the door creaked open. The hallway welcomed me back like a refuge. I stumbled out, breathing heavily, only to find the figure still standing there, arms now dangling at its sides. Its head tilted slightly as if studying my reaction. "Help me," it whispered again, but this time the tone was different, urgent, desperate. It took a step forward. I felt trapped. I had a decision to make, flee or confront whatever this was. Before I could think too long, the lights flickered in the hall. And then everything went dark. I blinked, trying to adjust to the sudden darkness. The figure loomed before me, an indistinct shape that seemed to absorb the shadows around it. I could hear my breathing quick, shallow, desperate. The whispering returned, faint but insistent, circling around me. Then I remembered the flashlight I kept in my bag. My fingers fumbled around until I found it. With a quick click, the beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the hall. I pointed it at the figure. The light flickered slightly, and for a second, I thought I saw something in its eyes, a glimmer of hope, or perhaps fear. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice stronger than I felt. "Help me," it repeated, this time louder. The urgency in its voice sent chills down my spine. "You don't understand." My gut twisted. Understand what? I took a cautious step backward, ready to bolt if necessary. Before the figure could respond, I heard the sound again, the scuffling from inside apartment 2B. It was louder now, sharper. I turned my attention back to the door, unsure of what would come next. The whispers seemed to merge with the scratching, forming a cacophony of unsettling noise. That was when I noticed a small, flickering light coming from the open door of 2B. I felt drawn to it despite my instincts screaming for me to run. The figure seemed to sense my hesitation. "They're in there," it warned, voice trembling. "You need to see." "See what?" I shot back. "What is happening?" The figure took another step forward, and I realized I should have backed away. It reached out slowly, a hand hovering in front of me. "Memories. Secrets." The flashlight flickered, and for a moment, the hugeness of the darkness loomed over us. I shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the doorframe of the empty apartment. The light pulsed again, as if trying to communicate something important. I glanced back at the shadowy figure, wrestling with my fear and an urge for answers. Something was clearly wrong with apartment 2B, and now with my vivid terror of the moment, I wondered if I was just about to cross a threshold that would change everything. "All right," I said, my heart racing. "Let us go." I edged back into the dark room, guided by the eerie light. The scuffling intensified, and I felt the figure at my side. My heartbeat quickened. Maybe I was making a mistake, but I needed to know what was going on. As I stepped over the threshold, the light flickered again, revealing a shape in the corner, something crawling, something that shouldn't be there. And then, silence. The flashlight died. I froze, the sudden silence pressing against me like a weight. My heart was pounding, and the darkness felt thicker than before. I could barely see, but the flicker of light was still fresh in my mind. That shape, it had been there, moving in the corner. What had I stumbled into? Desperate, I tapped the flashlight, but it was completely dead. I cursed under my breath, wishing I had checked the batteries. The figure next to me shifted, and the air buzzed with its nervous energy. "Don't leave," it whispered urgently. "You need to see the truth." I took a deep breath, summoning my remaining courage. "Show me," I croaked out, trying to sound determined. In response, the figure moved deeper into the room, guiding me with an unseen pull. I stepped forward, crossing the threshold completely. The floor was cold beneath my bare feet. The smell hit me next, a mix of dampness and something else, something rotten. "What is happening here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's been here a long time," the figure replied, its voice quaking like the light that had gone out. "It doesn't want to be found." I strained my eyes in the darkness, trying to make out shapes. The scuffling came again, this time louder. The sound was shifting, moving closer, and I could almost feel the energy of whatever was making it. Panic clawed at my throat. "We should go," I urged, glancing back, but the figure shook its head. "No, you can't leave. It will get you." A shiver crawled down my spine. "What is it?" I pressed, trying to grasp the reality of what was unfolding. The air seemed charged with something sinister, and I felt more isolated with each passing second. Just then, a low growl rumbled from the corner, sending my adrenaline spiking. I turned sharply, scanning the dark with heightened senses. That was when I saw its glowing eyes in the shadows, locked onto me. They pierced through the gloom, and I felt an icy wave of fear wash over me. "Run!" I shouted, instinctively stepping back, but the figure seized my arm. "No. You need to confront it." "Confront what?" I yelled back, but my next breath caught in my throat as the eyes moved closer. I could make out more detail now, a hulking silhouette that seemed to merge with the darkness. It was like nothing I had ever seen before. "Trust me," the figure insisted, its voice a frantic whisper. "You need to remember." "Remember?" The urgency in its voice rang in my head, but my instinct screamed at me to flee. The growling intensified, and I felt my legs tremble beneath me. "I can't," I stammered, already backing away. That's when the figure pulled me closer. "You're not alone," it said, and then, in a surprised gasp, it released my arm. I stumbled back, and in that fleeting moment, my eyes widened as I realized something important. There were more shapes, the outlines of people, barely visible against the black. They hovered just beyond the reach of the faint light that flickered at the entrance. Then everything went dark again. I gasped as the darkness swallowed everything. It felt suffocating, and my panic surged. I stood frozen for a moment, trying to adjust to the absence of vision. I heard the low growl again, but this time it was closer, almost like it was right next to me. "Get behind me!" the figure hissed. I couldn't tell who it was, but I instinctively obeyed, moving back to press against its body. It was solid and warm, a small comfort in the midst of terror. A sudden crash echoed from somewhere nearby, making me jump. I needed to see something, anything. I fumbled around in the darkness, hoping to find something to help me. My hand brushed against something cold and metallic, and I gripped it tightly. "Hold on to that," the figure urged. "It will protect you." "Protect me from what?" I whispered, my heart racing as I gripped the object. My mind searched for memories that could shed light on this nightmare. The growling grew louder, vibrating through the floor. I could barely concentrate. "Please, just tell me what is happening," I pleaded. "There's a darkness that feeds on fear," it said. "You have to face it, or it will consume you." "Consume me?" I echoed, the words chilling me to the bone. I felt lightheaded, my breath coming in short bursts. The noise intensified, and I knew I couldn't stay in the dark forever. "I can't do this. I can't face it." "Remember, you've faced it before," the figure insisted. I could sense urgency in its tone, as if something terrible was looming close. Suddenly, the growl transformed into a horrible roar. The temperature plummeted, and I could feel the breath of whatever creature stirred in the shadows, hot and rancid. My vision blurred as fear clouded my thoughts. "Where are you?" I cried, scanning the dark. I felt disoriented. "Show yourself." Just as I shouted, the warmth of the figure next to me pulled away. "I can't," it said, almost pained. "But you can." In that moment, I remembered. The outlines of the people I had seen earlier, they were faces I recognized, familiar yet distant. Why hadn't I realized it before? I opened my mouth to call out their names, but the roar erupted again, shaking the very foundations of the room. "Focus," the figure urged, and I realized I had to push past my fear. As I steadied myself, the dim light flickered back into existence. I squinted, desperate to see clearly. That's when I saw a glimpse of movement amidst the shadows. The hulking silhouette was inching closer, its glowing eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin prick. It was a form I thought I'd left behind, something from my past that should have stayed buried. With a surge of strength, I raised the object in my hand, ready to confront whatever came next. I had to. This nightmare demanded answers, and I would not let it consume me. But before I could act, the darkness closed in, and I felt a strangling grip around my throat. I struggled against the grip, my heart racing even faster than before. The cold, clammy fingers against my throat were an unwelcome reminder of something far worse than the shadows. My vision blurred again, and in a panic, I swung the metallic object. I wasn't even sure what I was aiming at, but I had to defend myself. "Stop!" I shouted, my voice echoing into the darkness. But the grip tightened, squeezing the breath from my lungs. I kicked out hard, desperate to shake off whatever haunting presence was close. And then, like a brittle thread snapping, the grip vanished. I gasped for air, dropping to the ground. The darkness shifted slightly, letting in slivers of muted light that ghosted around the edges of my surroundings. I blinked, slowly regaining my senses. I was back in the small, cluttered room I had called home, but it felt wrong. The shadows seemed deeper, as if they were waiting, watching me. "Where did you go?" I called, hoping for the figure to return. "Can you help me?" But no answer came. Instead, there was only silence. I realized I could still feel the remnants of dread clinging to my skin. I scanned the room for anything out of place, anything that might clarify what had happened. That was when I noticed a faint shimmer of light coming from the crack beneath my apartment door. I crawled over, heart pounding. My mind raced with possibilities. Had someone forgotten to turn off their lights? Or was it more sinister? I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear. The faint sounds of muffled voices drifted through, echoing off the walls. They sounded familiar. I stood up, torn between curiosity and fear. I had to know who was there. Slowly, I turned the knob and opened the door just a crack, peering out into the dimly lit hallway. What I saw made my stomach twist. The flickering light was coming from the empty apartment next door where no one had been living for months. The voices grew louder, coming from within the space. Whispering words mixed with the hum of electricity. "Maybe they're just having a party," I murmured to myself, but everything about it felt wrong. The apartment had been deserted for too long, I had stopped seeing the neighbors move their things out ages ago. Suddenly, a loud thud came from inside, followed by an eerie silence that sent chills down my spine. I took a step back, but then hearing a low, familiar growl made me freeze. The same sound from moments before. What was going on? I felt the pull of the darkness again, drawing me back. It was clear I couldn't ignore the mystery next door. I had to confront whatever was causing this disturbance, but the thought made me tremble. With every ounce of courage, I pushed the door open further and stepped into the dim corridor of the unknown. Each step echoed, a reminder that I was crossing a threshold I had hesitated to approach. And then, from inside the apartment, I heard a voice that made my heart drop. "You shouldn't have come here." The door creaked as I glanced back, but the darkness behind me was an even larger mystery. A shiver ran down my spine. I had already come too far to turn back. I took a deep breath, forcing my legs to move toward the unsettling light that beckoned. The moment I crossed the threshold into the empty apartment, a wave of cold air enveloped me, as if the atmosphere itself held its breath. The familiar sounds from before were now sharper voices whispering in a low, conspiratorial tone. "Go away," I barely heard, but the urgency in that voice sent my heart into overdrive. I pressed forward, my instincts nagging at me to retreat, yet something compelled me closer. The living room was empty, save for a few dusty pieces of furniture that looked oddly preserved, untouched by time. I was drawn to the flicker of the light source, an old lamp in the far corner, its bulb flickering erratically. I stepped further in, forcing my eyes to adjust. On the floor, I saw what looked like a path of scattered photographs. They were crumpled and worn, each image hinting at someone else's past. As I reached down to pick one up, the floorboard creaked beneath my weight, an unnerving reminder of my intrusion. I felt an almost immediate shift in atmosphere, as if I had disturbed something sinister hiding beneath the surface. The whispers escalated, intertwining with another sound, the growl. It resonated in my chest, vibrating with a malevolence I couldn't ignore. Then, I finally looked at the photograph in my hand. It was of me, taken from the hallway just outside my own apartment. I dropped it like it burned. This wasn't some random party, I was being watched. "Please, come out," I shouted, my voice barely above a whisper now, thick with fear. The air felt charged, as if the room recognized my plea and was about to respond. My heartbeat echoed in my ears, fast and heavy. That's when I spotted something move in the shadow behind the lamp. A figure, indistinct but somehow familiar, melted in and out of the darkness, watching me. Panic surged through me, but I stood my ground, determined to catch a glimpse of whatever or whoever had been watching me. I took a tentative step closer. "Who are you?" The words barely escaped my lips before the figure seemed to sharpen into focus, a silhouette of someone I recognized, but the face was obscured. "Leave now," the voice repeated, more insistent, and I felt its chill steal through the room. My instincts screamed at me to turn around and run, but there was dread lurking just outside the door, too. I looked back at the door I had left ajar. It seemed darker now. A glance at the photograph again caught my eye, a reflection in the glass. I saw not just me, but the shadow behind me, moving slowly, creeping closer. I turned, my breath hitching in my throat. But the figure was gone. In its place, a message scratched into the wall caught my attention: "They're coming for you. Trust no one." I felt the ground beneath my feet tremble. That was when the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness. My heart raced as panic set in, and I knew I had to get out before they found me. I stumbled backward, my instincts commanding me to flee. Just as I reached for the door, the light flickered again, illuminating the space for a brief moment. In that heartbeat, I caught sight of something glimmering on the floor, a small locket nestled amongst the photographs. I hesitated, torn between curiosity and fear. I leaned down, heart pounding, and picked it up. The locket was cold and heavy in my palm, engraved with swirling designs. I could almost feel a pulse emanating from it, beckoning for me to open it. But I knew I shouldn't linger. "Leave now," the voice echoed in my mind, and I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting the shadowy figure to reappear. The air remained still, but the whispers intensified, becoming a low chant wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. I shoved the locket into my pocket, its weight constant against my thigh, and rushed to the door. The sounds from outside, the chatter, the laughter, felt distant now, consumed by the growing chaos of the whispers. With trembling hands, I opened the door and stepped back into the hallway. But it wasn't over. My instincts were still on high alert. I think I heard footsteps lingering behind me, echoing softly in the corridor. I turned, my heart racing, but there was no one there. Just shadows clinging to the walls like dark tendrils, watching. I moved quickly toward my apartment, but suddenly, I felt a draft sweeping past me. The chill ran up my spine, and I shivered. I glanced back at the empty apartment one last time, the faint light still flickering behind me. Then I saw it barely visible against the wall, more words scratched into the paint. "They know you're here." I felt my pulse quicken. I wanted to scream, to call for help, but fear sealed my lips. Instead, I hurried to my apartment door, fumbling for my keys. They felt impossibly heavy in my shaking hand. I swung the door open and rushed inside, slamming it shut behind me. My breath came in ragged gulps as I leaned against the door, listening intently. The whispers receded, but the heavy silence was more unsettling. I glanced at the locket I had grabbed. With a mixture of dread and curiosity, I opened it. Inside was a faded picture, two people standing close together, their faces smiling at something unseen. A rush of familiarity washed over me, but I couldn't place them. I flipped it around, searching for any identifying marks, and noticed a date etched into the metal, 1 year ago. Before I could process this, I heard a soft, persistent knock at my door. My heart leaped into my throat. "Who is it?" I called, my voice trembling. No answer. Just the knock, louder this time, steady and measured. I stepped away from the door. They were coming for me after all. The whispers from the empty apartment echoed in my mind, and I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. Then came a voice from the other side, low and insistent. "You have to let me in." I froze. The urgency in the voice felt all too familiar, but I couldn't rationalize it. "Leave me alone," I shouted, backing away. The knocking grew frantic, and I could hear the heavy breaths as something pressed against the door. I knew I had to make a decision. But before I could act, the door rattled violently, sending shards of panic through me. The time for action had come. I backed away from the door, the pounding against it intensifying. My heart raced as I scanned the room for an escape. Shadows loomed, thickening like a fog of dread. The whispers began to rise again, echoing in my ears, but I forced myself to focus. They were saying something I couldn't quite grasp. Listen to the truth. Then it hit me, a realization through the chaos. I had to confront whatever was out there. The voice demanded that I open the door again, but I felt the weight of the locket in my pocket. It was the key to understanding, to my fear, to their fear. The urge to know grew stronger, overwhelming the impulse to hide. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice trembling but louder than before. The knocking paused, and a tense silence filled the air. "Help me," the voice croaked from beyond the door. It was closer this time, pressing against the thin wood. "You're not safe. You have to listen." A surge of adrenaline shot through me. "If you're trying to trick me, I won't fall for it. No more games." The voice insisted, a deeper timbre mixed with desperation. "You need to see the truth." I hesitated, fear coiling tightly in my gut. But the whispers from the dark corner, from that empty apartment, fueled my choice. They carried a resonance of urgency I couldn't ignore. I approached the door, gathering the courage for what might come next. I reached out, hand trembling as I placed it on the knob. "I'll open the door, but you need to promise to tell me everything. No more hiding." A soft sigh emerged from the other side. "I promise." With a decisive turn, I opened the door. The hallway was empty, the darkness stretching away into an unsettling quiet. But then I noticed it again, a flicker of light spilling from apartment 2B. It pulsed like a heartbeat, begging me to step closer. As I stood there, the whispers faded, and warmth washed over me, a flicker of recognition illuminating my thoughts. It was not fear that I needed to confront, but the very essence I had tried to bury. I felt a pull toward the mystery of that apartment, its history woven with threads I could no longer ignore. I stepped outside, moving with purpose toward the eerie glow. The door of apartment 2B was ajar, just a sliver of inviting light illuminating the floorboards. The whispers returned, soft yet distorted, wrapping around me like familiar arms urging me home. Inside, the space felt alive, the air thick with a sense of urgency. I was almost entranced by the light. It danced and flickered as if encouraging me forward. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but I pressed onward, feeling a tug in my chest like a heartbeat echoing through the silence. The photos scattered across the floor caught my eye again, the faces, familiar yet distant. I bent down to touch one. It was of a gathering, filled with many people I couldn't quite place. And then, hovering just next to a photograph, I caught sight of a journal half hidden beneath an old chair. I pulled it out, its pages brittle, yellowing with time. As I began to read, fragments of the past floated through me, stories forgotten. Names that felt achingly familiar wafted like a memory just at the edge of my awareness. But just as understanding began to seep in, the shadows shifted, and I felt that palpable dread pressing against me. The fear returned, an unwelcome companion that urged me to flee. Suddenly, something dark and heavy moved behind me, breaking the spell. I felt it long before I turned, like a looming storm cloud bursting forth. The growls returned, reverberating through the small space, and I spun just in time to see the silhouette emerging from the dark. The figure was closer now, more distinct. It was not merely an apparition but what seemed to be a version of someone I once knew. Their face was shrouded in shadows, but the familiarity tugged at my heart. I could feel the connection. "This is your chance," it whispered, the urgency flooding back. "To understand, to confront. What do you want from me?" I shouted, though my voice quavered. The shadows grew heavier, curling around the edges of my vision. "Remember," the figure urged, stepping closer, revealing the pain in its eyes, a reflection of my own anguish. "You have to face it, or it will consume you." I felt a swell of bravery collide with the fear that threatened to swallow me whole. I took a deep breath, stepping forward into the light. "Show me," I demanded, my voice steadying. But before the figure could respond, the lights flickered again, plunging the room into chaos. The growls turned into an unearthly roar, and the darkness enveloped me. When the light returned, I found myself standing outside, gasping in the cool night air. My heart raced wildly as I stumbled away from the building, glancing back at the aged apartment complex now looming in the distance. The whispers were gone, but the memories lingered, swirling in my mind like fragments of a broken dream. And as I made my way to safety, I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't left it all behind. I wondered who or what was still trapped in that apartment, waiting for someone to unlock its secrets. I felt that ambiguous weight pressing against me, the shadows whispering their truths just out of reach. I moved to a different city a week later to escape the memories, but I still look back sometimes, wondering about the whispers and the figure in the shadows. I guess I'll never know if those things were real or just a haunting echo of my own fears. But I know one thing: sometimes, the past doesn't truly let go.